The story that I'm hoping to share with you today starts in the Bahamas. I love traveling, and I was actually here on work, believe it or not. There are many jobs that you can do that take you to exciting and diverse locations. And I had my guidebook in front of me because I had a day off, and I thought, let's go see, what the guidebook says you should go see. So this is the National Library in the Bahamas. It was an 8-sided building, and it was supposed to be this architectural wonder. And when I got inside, this is what I saw. I hope you can see this. Everything is basically a disaster. Things were unkempt, piled up, falling all over the place. And since the Bahamas are a tropical island, things were rotting, right? It's 100% humidity 100% of the time when you get close to the equator in these small islands. And so I started thinking about this a little bit more. This was the capital city. This is the National Library. If this is the only library that people had access to in the biggest city, what does learning look like for kids? I mean, when I was a kid, I got to go to the Fridley public libraries and read to my heart's content. I did the reading competition every summer, and I read and I read and I read. Well, what if you don't have access to books? It's tougher to become an avid reader, right? And what if you're a teacher and you don't have access to books? It's tough to be a good teacher, right? So the quality of education in places like the Bahamas, in materially poorer states, and where I now work in small island developing states, they've given it an acronym, SIDS. This is what libraries might look like. I actually started thinking further, they don't have libraries out in more rural areas. So I'm just going to take a wild guess, but I have a feeling that some of you in the room might be able to picture, you've heard of, you're more worldly than we were back at FHS in 1993, to picture rural schools that don't have any libraries. So being that I knew this was actually when I was writing my dissertation for getting my PhD, I knew I was about to become a teacher, and I started thinking, what about teachers who have access to no materials? So this was sort of planting the seed. I'm taking you along on a journey. I got to travel to, this is the Solomon Islands. Has anybody heard of the Solomon Islands? Oh, all right. We're going to take a journey around the world today. We're going to go to the Pacific Islands. This is in the Pacific Islands. So these were teachers that I got to meet who were basically handed a laptop, a cute little green laptop that you're going to see a picture of in a few slides. They got a week's worth of training. They had never seen a laptop before. Week's worth of training, and told, go, transform how you teach. This is all you should need. So how do you think that went? Not so well, right? Not really so well. So this was them getting together, and they knew that I wasn't necessarily affiliated with the laptop program, but they were there to complain about how things were not going very well. Again with this group. So this group, half of them had received laptops and the other half hadn't. How do you think they felt? There were a lot of jealousy issues with this group, right? They were not very happy. So this is what some classrooms might look like. And these are, you're starting to see the pictures of the tiny green laptops. So my work, what I look at in my research now that I'm a professor, is what happens when you bring technology to places that look like this. What goes right? What goes wrong? What could we do better? So the big questions in my research. What happens when you bring technology where it hasn't been before? Can it actually improve people's quality of life? That's what I really care about, quality of education. People frequently look to technology as a magic bullet. How many of you have a tablet or a laptop? So it's tempting to think that if only the people who lived in places that look like this had a laptop, they'd be doing better, right? But what do you maybe not see in this picture or that picture?
A satellite.
So it would be very difficult to get connectivity, right? The internet. What about electricity? Do you see much electricity in that hut? No. So you need those things for your laptops and your tablets to be useful, right? You'd be amazed how many people take that for granted, because we can. That's human nature. We take for granted that we can plug our laptops right in the wall. So I started Okay, so back to the two last bullet points. How do we fight the technology as a magic bullet syndrome? Because believe me, that's what I'm fighting every day. And then what do my students and the people that I work with in the field get out of this? So that's what I really look at. And in my teaching, I get to work in teams. This has been the best part of teaching for me, is actually taking my students with me out into the field and letting them see what it's really like. I encourage you to try to do this kind of work if you can. It will change your life. So back to the story. So here's that cute little green laptop. I took this picture in Haiti. This was one of those misguided technology as a silver bullet programs that I was telling you about. So 11,000 laptops got donated to Haiti, of these cute little green laptops. $25 million from the Inter-American Development Bank, which is a big development organization. And nobody along the way thought to include any part of that budget for electricity. Whoops. 95% of Haiti's primary schools don't have electricity. 95%. So the people who ran this organization, called One Laptop Per Child Haiti, contacted a colleague of mine who asked me, could you enlist your students to come up with some type of a solar powering system that could charge these laptops? So that's exactly how I got started here. So we did it. I hope everybody can see these pictures. We actually installed a 2.4 kilowatt solar system on a primary school's roof down in Haiti. Everybody know where Haiti is? Just south of Florida. It's another tropical island. Okay. And wonderful things happened on this trip. We got to interact with the students. We had success setting up the solar system, and it went so well, in fact, that some more inspiring pictures. This is what the power charging system looked like that my students came up with. We worked with a lot of locals from Haiti, and we even went back and we set up internet connectivity at the school so that the laptops wouldn't be useless, even though they could be charged. They didn't have very much preloaded on them, so we wanted the school to have internet access. So we went back and we did that. And I have these really happy pictures to show you of the great success. But in all of the cases of all the stories that I'm going to tell you, they can always be followed up with, what could go wrong? So there's always things that go wrong. We went to Haiti 3 times, installed the solar system that I told you about, internet connectivity at the school. We did all of the fundraising for that, so like $40,000 twice to do all of that work. And I even had a student who wasn't happy with the previous charging system that you saw, so they took it under their own initiative to build a really cool-looking charging system. All of these wonderful things, right? And here's the what could go wrong. So we had a communication bottleneck with our partner. If they didn't want us to know any bad news, they just didn't tell us. We were supposed to be training people from the Ministry of Education and teachers on how to use the solar system, and that never ever happened. So you saw the pictures of the solar system. I'm very happy to tell you that it's actually still working today, but we had no confidence when we left that it was going to be the case. We held a meeting with parents when we were there, and very few showed up, and they were not very excited about the project. It's worse than that, but I'm going to leave time for that only if we have time at the end. And finally, they blew through their $25 million and ran out of the money. And we had set up only our pilot solar system. So even though it could scale, the money was gone. So the president of the country said, our Ministry of Education, it was never Haiti's money, right? It was a gift from this big organization, the development organization. So they ran out of that money, and the Haitian government said, we're not following, what's the saying, good money after bad. So they cut the program. So we felt pretty bittersweet when we were finishing up our second deployment. We were wondering, what could we do now? We don't have a partner anymore. What are we going to do? So I challenged my students to come up with something more micro. Smaller and simplified, what we were going to call a solar computer lab in a box. If you can picture it. And I'll show you, but I want you to picture it in your head first, what it would take, what it would look like. better partnerships on the ground, no more bottlenecks of communication, and then actually local capacity building and training would have to take place. So this was what we drew as a picture. This was our design. And I got to challenge the students to build it, and they did. And we demoed it. And we demoed it twice. And then we actually got to deploy it. So I chose to run this particular class. So I'm really lucky because just about every semester I've gotten to have these project-based classes where students work on this type of project for a whole semester. And then we also work on all the other things that would be necessary to be able to deploy this in the field at the end of the semester. So either during the summer or during the winter break. This class I chose to run as an entrepreneurial class. So they actually had to write a business plan as well to try to launch this into a business. That didn't happen, but in the spirit of it being an entrepreneurial class, I pitched it to someone from Google who was at a conference that I was at. And he said, oh my gosh, the idea of this is so cool. You know what would be even cooler is if you could deploy it on some remote island somewhere where they don't have any infrastructure, no roads, no electricity, no internet connectivity, where, hey, they've never even heard of the internet. And so I said to him, I can do that. Have you ever heard of Chook? Anybody in here heard of Chook? Well, luckily he had. So Google became our first funder. And because we actually got a good deal of funding, we decided to try to carry out all of those things that I told you on the previous slide I wanted to have take place. So we actually carried out a workshop for the capacity building. We traveled to Chook in the Federated States of Micronesia. I'm going to show you on a map in just a second where that is. And we worked on our partnerships. So here's the map. All right, that's not where, Chook is right in the middle here. And it has the most islands. It is one of the 4 Federated States of Micronesia. That line going right through. Sorry, this is the equator. It's 6 degrees north of the equator. By looking at that map, do you have a better idea of where it is? It's in the northern Pacific. 6 degrees north of the equator means northern. If you can see right in the little box here, China would be right to the upper left. Given that Chook has so many islands, wait, take a step back. It's the Federated States of Micronesia. So there's 4 federated states, of which Chook is the most populous, has the most islands, and is by far the poorest of the 4. So I like to take on challenges. So we decided that we were going to set up a Wi-Fi link, exactly like we had done in Haiti, but over water. So 19 kilometers of open water from one of the islands in the Chook Lagoon to the capital city. You can see the image on there. A poster advertising for our workshop, some pictures of the hands-on workshop. We actually did another demo at the University of Guam, which is also in the Pacific Islands. And then we took the people who were at this workshop who were originally from Chook, traveled back to Chook, and set up our Wi-Fi long-distance link. The whole goal was to bring our solar computer lab in a box and set it up there. Or that was one of my main goals, I should say, because my students had built this thing and it actually worked. Ta-da! We set it up. And now your response is, what could go wrong? Right? So here it is from the box. I neglected to say, the whole thing, the innovation here that we have, the box actually becomes the table. So there's no wasted materials. What it is, there's the box, there's 2 solar panels that you don't see in this picture, pre-wired, so that you can basically just plug in the 6 laptops that come in this solar computer lab in a box. So a really innovative idea, and totally simplified down from that big solar system that you saw in the pictures from Haiti, right? I told my students, you have to have it so simple that a social scientist like me can set it up, not an engineer. And they did it. And again, you're going to ask, what could go wrong? Well, so while we were there, I was presented with the opportunity to present to 400 teachers from across the whole state of Chook. I couldn't turn down that opportunity. And I was presenting about this solar computer lab in a box. That meant all the teachers were in the capital city with me, not out on the island on the day that it got deployed. So if we set up that computer lab and there were no teachers there, what do you think went wrong? A very good answer. Actually, so the setup went perfectly, but when we got back 8 months later, that's what it looked like. It was under a sheet and it had never been used. Oops. Right? I know better than this, but given the circumstances, I didn't know what else I could do. So how do we get from covered up to actually uncovered? Well, happily on that day, I was able to give some impromptu training to some of the teachers, and then it got used after that. So a quasi-happy ending. But are you ready for the next stage of the story? This is Melody, a Peace Corps volunteer. You can all tell which one's Melody, right? Okay, so she is a Peace Corps volunteer on basically this island, and we had installed our computer lab on that island. So she was literally volunteering, stationed there for 2 years on the next island over. She contacted us through the email on the website that I had set up about the project and said, hey, I'm on the next island over. Can you set up a computer lab on my island? So we set about to try to do that. Are you all ready to take a trip to Chuk? Seatbelts fastened, tray table in its upright position. It's going to be quick. Here's Melody's island. We're flying on over it. We're on the main island. We're getting our boat ready to travel out to her island. Everywhere you go in between these islands, you have to take a boat. And it rains about half the time, so you'd better be prepared to get wet. Does this sound like a good environment in which to introduce computer labs? So here we are, traveling to her island. We're getting out of the boat. And here's Melody's school. We're getting to talk to Melody. They were on lunch break when we arrived, so that's why everyone's out in the hallways. Here's Melody with her kindergartners, who she taught in the morning. What do you see missing in this picture? Tables and chairs, right? Not all of the schoolrooms look like this, but they didn't have enough room for the kindergartners, so they repurposed the principal's desk, office. And so the kindergartners got to learn in a room with no tables or chairs, which is one reason why we wanted, that solar computer lab in a box to have the table, because in many places that we've gone, they don't even have enough furniture, right? So these were the 7th and 8th graders combined class. These were the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders combined class. I hope that I'm hearing the teachers groaning, right? It's hard to have combined classes with this many grade levels. And so Melody asks us, can you help set up a computer lab? I wanted to do better than what we had done at the previous school, right? So we started thinking, how can we connect all of these schools? Here's where we had connected the first school. Here's Melody's school. And we started thinking, when we actually set up that point-to-point connection, it was lightning fast. But we were not going out to the internet. We were only going through an intranet between the schools. So the brains start working. How could we take advantage of that really fast connection? If you're not going out to the internet, if you're not taking advantage of this super slow and expensive satellite out to space where we get the internet from when you use satellite, what would we have to do? If you only have an intranet and not the internet, what do you need to actually have it be useful? Yeah, you'd have to preload all the data on there. Does that sound like a simple thing to do? It's not. But we started doing it anyway. So we started working with Melody and another Peace Corps volunteer who, sorry, here's another, what could go wrong? She left the Peace Corps like a month later for personal reasons. So we were back to only working with Melody, which was not bad. Melody was fantastic to work with. My students came up with a teacher training manual, a website to host all of the data that we had preloaded, and this, I don't know if you can see this very well. It's a small black box for technology. It's called a server. Does anyone in here know what a server does? Okay. It stores information and it serves it up when you ask for it. But We'll get it back into that, because what do you need to use this out in a place like Chuk? This is so not useful right now. You need all of the accessories that you see here, right? You would need a mouse, you would need a keyboard, you would need a monitor. Did you see any of those things at Melody School? No. Absolutely not. So even though we were working on this, I knew it still needed to get simpler. And in the meantime, all of these schools that we visited, the 5 that you saw on the map before, or the 6 actually, this is the other 5 with Melody School, they don't have electricity, they don't have connectivity, they don't have mice, laptops, and screens, right? So I started thinking, how can we make it even simpler? How can we get this technology out to every single school that looks like the ones on the previous page, no matter that they have these infrastructural challenges? Even simpler. Also, all of the people that you saw in those pictures are eventually going to need to use the internet. When they travel to the capital city, there's one cyber cafe in the whole state of Chuk. Our partner runs it. So we get to go there every time we go. And every single time I've been there, I take pictures. Every single person on every single computer, what do you think they're using? Facebook. It's how they communicate with all of their relatives who are dispersed around the world, but mainly in the US. So all of the northern Pacific Island states, they have an agreement with the United States so that they can travel and work in the United States, which means that about 30% or more, they stopped counting, of the population is in the United States. Every single person, with one exception, one person was using Yahoo Mail once. Otherwise, every single person I've ever seen, which is in the hundreds now, was using Facebook. Is there more to the internet than Facebook? Right? So I think that people deserve to know that there's more to the internet than Facebook. And as an educator, I want them to know about all of the learning opportunities. People who use the internet for the very first time also tend to click on, you know how you get a link in an email and you guys are savvy enough to know that you should never click on it, right? But first-time users don't know that. And kids especially seem to surf to very dangerous sites that they shouldn't be surfing to. So if we can keep them offline, we avoid a whole lot of these challenges. And the cost issue. They don't have to pay for their internet connection because, well, it's actually not an internet connection. It's offline. Then, as you saw, I met some Peace Corps volunteers, and they go out to schools exactly like this, as you've seen. But I looked them up on their website, and across the Pacific Islands, this is their mission. Teach English, use technology where possible, help in the school and community as requested. These are actually bullet points that I copied off of their webpage. What a perfect partner, I realized, to have out in the field. They're there for 2 years. They're all young Americans. They're not all young. They're all Americans. Most of them have just graduated from college and are looking for a way to help and some adventure in life. A perfect partner. So I spoke with the Peace Corps in both Micronesia, where I had been working, the Federated States of Micronesia, and in Vanuatu, which is another Pacific island. They said yes, they welcomed us, and shortly after that we spoke to the Peace Corps in Samoa and Tonga. And so I challenged my students, this is a brand new challenge, brand new class, brand new university actually. I said to them, can you come up with the Solar Computer Lab or Solar Digital Library? My students have always come through. Not necessarily right at first. This is what it looked like at first. We got some parts together. Then they put the solar panel on the top of a waterproof box. And then they put an even bigger solar panel on an even bigger box. I call this the boat. I challenged them to come up with something that could fit into the Peace Corps volunteers' backpack. That one wouldn't do, right? So this was our first prototype that I was proud of. We 3D printed this. I challenged the students, figure out how to 3D print something. Our 3D printed beautiful model costs $700. Is that affordable for these schools? No. Not so much, right? So we knew we couldn't go with that. But the happy point is that the week after that, as soon as my students found that out, and this wasn't waterproof or see-through, by the way, so it isn't perfect. My students, the very next week, came up with this clear, waterproof plastic box that cost all of $10. A much improved solution, right? So this is what the solar library looks like right now. I brought one with me. I hope we'll have time. I think I need to start talking quicker to go through how it works. But I just want to quickly show you some more highlight photos that we built them, 50 of them, posed, tested. I got to demo it to the head librarian of the Peace Corps. And then we traveled to the Federated States of Micronesia and carried out training with Peace Corps volunteers. And I'm happy to say I got to bring students with me. We posed at the end. It's always good to pose for pictures. Kind of wish I had a Google Glass right now to take a picture of all of you. We traveled a month later to Vanuatu, one of the other countries that I mentioned, carried out another training. And that was the summer of 2015. And then we came back to my university and I ran some workshops, recruited some more students to work on it. We made improvements. We made it even better. Built some more. And went to Samoa. This is picture number 1 from Samoa. Picture number 2 from Samoa. They have 2 islands, so we got to carry out 2 trainings there. And then back to the Federated States of Micronesia for our second year there. Here's a map, finally, the promised map. This is the Federated States of Micronesia up here. Here's Vanuatu, Tonga, and Samoa. And now you have a better idea, right, with the picture of Australia in there, of where we're talking about. The Pacific is huge. It's bigger than any continent in terms of land mass, but it's not land. It's water. So you have really sparsely populated places. There's a lot of poverty there. There aren't that many opportunities to do work that isn't, let's say, agricultural or fishing. There's a lot of fishing. So we're dealing with some of the most challenged locations on Earth. And that's why I wanted to go there, because if I can have something work there, I know it'll work anywhere. With my couple of seconds left, what else is important to me is that everything is open access. So we don't have anything that other people should be making a living off of or that has registered, patented things on it. We always say how we're going to, we actually have even posted a web page on how to build one. And I'm planning to bring this new group of students with me to Tonga in December. So I'm bringing 5 students. We're making Tonga our 4th country. We keep hearing good things, but some recommendations from the field. So we keep trying to include new and better things about the library. I love this picture because it's a child showing his grandmother how it all works. As you know, that's how technology works, right? Give it to a 3-year-old, they'll figure it out like that. All right. So, you ready to see how it works? The solar computer lab in the box was too big to fit in my suitcase. All right. Solar panel, 10 watts. There are wires that come off of the solar panel. They come off with direct current, not alternating current. Oh, that's a little too... All we do with this little thing here is regulate the voltage down from 12 volts to 5 volts so that we can plug it into this battery that is the basic kind that you would get off of Amazon to charge your cell phone with. Because we can do that, we can take this USB plug right from the battery. There it is. It's so small. And plug it into this fully functional computer. Has anybody seen a computer this small before? It's a Raspberry Pi. You've got it. You've heard of it before. Your smartphone, by the way, is as advanced as this, right? You actually have an entirely working computer in your smartphone. But this is also a fully functional computer. We're not using all of its functions. We're using it as a server. Remember what I mentioned earlier in the talk? Because I've just plugged this in, we have an SD card in the back. And I know you can't even see this in the back. It's a micro SD card. It's so small, but it holds the brains of the entire operation right on that SD card. So all of the content that we curated is preloaded on there. The website that we have is preloaded on there. And there's code that tells it to start up as a server. So it only serves up the information in one direction, as well as tells it to create a Wi-Fi hotspot. So any device that could connect to the internet can connect to our computer and surf the web page that has all of the educational content preloaded onto it. So I'm going to press my luck and see if we can do that right now. So if you can, everybody can, as much as you can see, I've created a new Wi-Fi hotspot here called SPELL for Solar Powered Educational Learning Library. We're going to connect to it. It's probably going to give us a warning that we're not actually connected to the internet, because we're not. We're connecting just to this little computer. Are we connected? And then we open up any browser, and the website address that we gave it is 10.10.10.10. Easy to remember. It's actually its IP address, but we actually have to be no, we are connected. Okay. Come on, Chrome. Oh. Huh. Oh, we might have proxy and firewall. I don't know if there's a... Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case, we can connect to Fridley Schools again, because we have an online version of the website as well. Oops. Is FHS? Nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Oh, I just hit disconnect. Because it's important to me to have both an online and an offline version. And we titled that one pacificschoolserver.org, and that's what it looks like. So we have all kinds of information, especially on climate change, for these Pacific Island schools, health and safety, language. We also have teaching resources, especially for the Peace Corps volunteers, local topics for each country that we go to, math, science. Have all of you heard of the Khan Academy videos? We have all those loaded on here, and encyclopedias for the schools. So just very quickly going to show you a video. I'll just play it for 10 seconds. And this may be, one of the first videos that any of them ever see. So for me, it's really important to show them people who look like them, people who are from their islands, right? And that's what I was hoping to talk with you about today. So if you have any questions for me, I'm so eager to hear them.
What is the cost of that individual kit currently?
Thank you. So the cost that I'm about to tell you is very misleading, because it took about 2 years to build with all free university student labor. Having said that, and you saw some of the pictures of the students building them, right? But all of the equipment is basically off the shelf, and it comes up to about $175 to build one of these. When we build them at scale with 50 or 75, it is actually quite a bit more expensive when you only build one at a time. Yes?
So did you fundraise for those tablets that the kids had?
Yes. Everything that you've seen here has been paid for with grants, basically, that I've applied for over the years. But also that students have helped me apply for. So that's all of these project-based classes that you've seen. We don't just work on technology. There are so many other things that you need to be able to do to make these kind of projects a reality, fundraising being one of them, a very important one. So the students are always gaining skills in all kinds of different areas that you might not even predict. In fact, that charging system that you saw in Haiti, that was actually designed by one of my sociology majors, who is one of the last people that you might expect to have such an eye for engineering. He was actually our best engineer on the site. So these kind of project-based hands-on classes can bring out the best in students, for sure.
How long do you stay at each location?
Usually about 10 days. So the training that we carry out with the Peace Corps volunteers only takes a day. And in fact, as you can see, this is such basic technology. That only takes about an hour of the whole day. The rest of the time we spend talking about what could go wrong. Because there's a lot. So what I didn't tell you about Melody at her school, remember the picture of Melody? We brought her tablets and the training manual, and she was so gung-ho to start using them. And her principal at her school, who also happened to be her father, because all of the Peace Corps volunteers stay with a family, kept saying no, 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 every single week to having teachers trained on how to use technology. So she finally, over Thanksgiving, so this was from August to Thanksgiving, she finally traveled to the capital city where she had internet connectivity at that cyber cafe that I was telling you about. And she emailed me and she said, you know, this is what's happened. And he's my father, I can't, and my principal. What do you do, right? So she asked, can I use the tablets with my 8th graders? I said, of course. You don't need to use them only with the teachers. The point is that they get used. So there is actually a happy ending to this story. She decided to use them with her 8th graders, as I indicated, and her 8th graders got the best English language scores in the whole state of Chuuk. She didn't know that, though. She came back to the US, she had finished her 2 years, and I was contacted over my blog by a person from Australia who was writing a report about the school situation in Chuuk. And he had heard about her 8th graders getting the best test scores. And so he wrote to me, because of course he could find me over the internet, and he said, was it the tablets? And I said, I doubt it. Let me ask Melody. So here's what she had done. She had 3 tablets. They didn't have all that educational info that we had been curating because tablets don't have room for that, right? So we just put like 10 educational apps on there, but otherwise it was your basic tablet. Of course, it has a camera on it. There's some games that come preloaded. She made her 8th graders show up on time for school when they were not with her, but she had a record of whether they had shown up on time. After lunch, she had them, and she made sure that they showed up on time back from lunch. And then she had them all afternoon, and if they behaved and they were good students, they could use the tablets as a reward after school. So I ask you, was it the tablets, or was it a creative teacher? It was both, right? So really good outcomes, but sometimes completely unexpected ways of using them.
Folks, we're about to have the bell ring. Can we all thank Dr. Hosman for speaking?
Thank you very much.